Welcome back to the Laravel Creator Community Series. Today I have Ben Bjurstrom, who is the creator of Prezet and quite a few other things. So Ben, I think we actually just talked about the name of this app, and I think I said it wrong between
Oh,
now and then.
yeah, no worries at all. I mean, who knows how it's supposed to be pronounced? It's a made up word, but I've been pronouncing it Prezet. So, like, as if it was a preset for Markdown blogging, just changing the S to a Z, but it doesn't really matter. So,
Prezet, sweet, sweet. So you are of course Laravel developer. What kind of well, I guess first off, like what is Prezet and like why would people want to use it?
yeah, so, Prezet is supposed to be a package that's super quick to install and lets you get a Markdown powered blog up and running, literally like in seconds. It comes with a nice install command. It, scaffolds everything you need as far as a couple of like example Markdown files. It, copies some templates over some Laravel, blade views into like the vendor directory. And then, yeah, basically you can just, PHP artisan serve and have a little Markdown power blog, running in a Laravel app, pretty much in no time. And the idea behind it is to just try to make that process sort of as easy as possible. So you're not having to configure, all the things that go into, when you're normally setting up a blog. So that's really the goal of the package.
Nice. And how did this come about? Like, were you just wanting to do it for your own personal thing, and then you're like, well, I should kind of make this into something?
I mean, yeah, that's exactly how it played out. So, I've been blogging in Markdown or writing in Markdown for years. I remember using like Jekyll way back in the day, which is this like Ruby package that built static sites from Markdown. And, it doesn't seem like it's something that really is taken off in the PHP community. But, after Jekyll, there was like Hugo and like Ghost and then there's a bunch of like JavaScript packages. Obviously, like Next.js has a lot of support for Markdown with tools like MDX, which lets you, put in like JSX components like inline and Markdown. But there just wasn't really anything out of the box for, in like the PHP Laravel community. Obviously, we have that great Common Mark package. But then I saw some blog posts and some videos by Aaron Francis, and he was talking about how his Markdown blog or his blog runs in Laravel using the Common Mark package. And I was like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. As much as I, like working in JavaScript, I feel more comfortable in Laravel. So, for a personal project, I was like, all right, let me try to figure out how all this Common Mark stuff works over in the Laravel side. But then, even following sort of like the stuff that Aaron Francis has done, there was still a lot of like setup that needed to be done. I had to, set up the action that actually read the Markdown files and, parse them and then pass that, HTML to the blade templates. And I was just doing, putting all these things together. And I was like, this should just be a package. So that way, everybody doesn't need to do this. So I tried to think about, what are like the sane defaults that can get people going out of the box, but then still build the package in a way to kind of make it customizable. Obviously, the theme that it comes with, people are going to want to customize that, but you have full control over, the blade templates. You can change the look and feel, however you want. I really try to give, the end users like full control to modify stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's really where the package came from. So
Nice. And I know you were talking about it being marked down, and this is sort of it just runs like completely flat file, right? Like it just scans the
right.
content directory and reads the what was it front matter and
Yep.
builds everything based on that.
Yep, that's exactly right. So, one of the things that I added was like a DTO. It's that great like DTO package. I probably mispronounce his name. I think it's Wendell. But it pulls the front matter out and then it converts that front matter into a DTO. So even if you had dozens or hundreds of Markdown files, if you were missing like the title, but your template is expecting a title, it'll like throw an error when it's like first reading the file. So you don't find out later when you navigate to the page that, oops, I forgot to set a title in like the front matter. So it really tries to, keep some of those foot guns like out of the way for you. But yeah, reading the front matter, reading the Markdown, and then, rendering it to HTML, all that kind of stuff. It does out of the box. So.
That's awesome. And then, like, what do you, as far as like your own, when you're using it, where are you hosting your output? I guess is that you kind of anywhere you want, I guess, right? Because it's just basically HTML at that point.
Well, okay, so then that's one of the key differences, because obviously within the Laravel community we have that the Jigsaw package, I think, by the Titan team, and I think the idea behind that package is to build a static site, right? So to boil everything down to a static site. Prezet's sort of meant to live in your application and be sort of more like a quasi-static site. Like you can use tools like Cloudflare caching in order to take a lot of the load off the server, but it doesn't compile down to a static site. And the reason I did that was sort of intentional, because I found that in the past when I'm building applications, little side projects, you obviously want your content site, where you're hosting like blog articles, things like that, maybe documentation. And suddenly now you have two deployments. You have your app deployment and you have like your content deployment. And I really wanted to simplify it by rolling those into one. And with like, proper caching, it's not, even if, you made it to the front page of Hacker News or something like that, it's not going to put much stress on your, application server, because it's all being cached by like Cloudflare or whatever. But yeah, because it's just a Laravel app, you can host it anywhere. If you already have a Laravel Forge subscription server, something like that, just throw it up there. That works fine. That's where I was hosting the Prezet documentation for a while at prezet.com. And then I started looking into hosting it with Bref, like serverlessly. I don't know if you've ever seen this like Bref package that sort of rolls up. It's sort of like Laravel Vapor in that it uses PHP deployed to like AWS Lambdas, but it's like open source, so you're not paying like a monthly fee to use it, and it doesn't give you nearly as much out of the box as Laravel Vapor does, but it's like a little more lightweight. So yeah, recently I moved the Prezet.com documentation over to being hosted serverlessly on Bref. And that works really well, because you're just paying like, pennies a month to host it. And if you didn't already have like a, 20 a month Laravel Forge subscription or a Laravel server running, which I bet most people do. But if for some reason you just wanted like a one-off hosting solution, then, that's pretty compelling as well. So.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. It's sort of, it's interesting as, somebody that's sort of, I've done both the flat file and then I've also done the deployment, sort of what you're describing. And it seems like I always go back to not wanting flat files. It's just because like there'll be some like random API that like I just want a feed of like something, and it's just so much easier to have a full PHP app right there instead of being like, oh well, all we can do is HTML and throw in some JavaScript.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just it's. Go ahead.
Oh no, I mean, yeah, even if you were just hosting like a personal blog, but you wanted subscribe to my newsletter or something, it's just a Laravel app, so just add a new subscribe route and with a post call and all that stuff, and you don't need to really think about or subscribe to some third party service to provide that. You just use your typical Laravel tools. So
exactly. And one of the cool things that you do that I don't know if I've seen many other apps in this space doing is you dynamically generate the what they call, I guess it's called an OG image, which is used for all the social sharing, and I think it's mainly just social sharing, right? But yeah, so if you're not familiar with this, so when you share an article, the OG tag, the meta OG image tag, will pull into like Twitter, well, X, Twitter, and Facebook and LinkedIn and all these places. So you're dynamically generating that, right?
Yeah, that's an option that the package provides. So it comes with an artisan command, preset OG image, and you can either, if you don't specify like which Markdown file you want to generate an OG image for, it'll prompt you through the Laravel prompts, ask you to input the slug of the one you want to generate, or you can do it with an all tag, and then it'll just like generate them for every single file. And yeah, it's the way it's doing it is there's a route that with a blade template tied to it, and then it uses browser shot to essentially navigate to that route. So the idea is that you would do this locally, or maybe set it up as part of like your CI pipeline. It wouldn't really be happening like on the fly in production. And then browser shot navigates to that route, and the blade template is like a 1200 pixels by 600 pixels tall OG image that you can again, it's a template that gets published in the vendor file, so you have total customization over what you want that OG image to look like, and it passes all the front matter data from the Markdown file to that template. So you could have, I have it set up to just put the title of the post, but you could have like the author of the post or any other data that's stored in the front matter, sort of generated into that OG image template. Browser snaps a picture of it, saves it to your images directory, and then the command updates the Markdown front matter with that OG image tag. So now when you navigate to that Markdown page or that blog post, that picture that it just took is going to be loaded in that OG image tag. And it works pretty well. I'm really happy with it.
That's awesome. Can you, I assume you can, like say like your blog post page, I assume you could just pull that in as kind of like a featured image for each of your posts as well if you really wanted to for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, because I've seen that, where instead of like a completely separate template, it's really just sort of like a snapshot of, maybe the header and then that like introductory paragraph. Yeah, you could totally do that. I'm trying to think. Currently, I mean, what I would do is probably just update the OJ image template to show, that information and then go from there. But I'm trying to think of like how you could maybe change where it's taking the picture from instead of going to the specific OG image template, just going to the blog post. That's something to look at as maybe like a flag to add to the OG image command.
Yeah, that sounds good. So this app itself, it's pretty new, right? You just launched it not too long ago, maybe a month or two?
Yeah, I think it started coming together to where I was trying to get the word out about it within like the last month or so. I've probably been working on it since like the beginning of the summer. That was when I was going through trying to build it for myself and that whole process of turning it into a package. But yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, I actually, you have a really well done video, like announcing it and showing how it works. And that's how I first came across it. It was in one of my feeds, and I was like, oh, that's pretty sweet. I was like, I need to reach out and learn more about this. And so you've done the marketing's been really good so far.
Yes, somewhat. I mean, it's always hard to get the word out about stuff, unless you have like, really big following. People, I was really trying to show just like how easy it makes it to get started. Again, that was kind of the real focus, because if you're just going to set up if you have to set up a million things, then you're just going to want to do it yourself so you can customize everything and it'll be just how you like, right? Like the only way that this works is if it's quick and easy. And so yeah, that's what I was really trying to convey in that video, that, with just one command, you can be up and running. So.
Yes, for sure. And then, so how's usage been? You starting to get people using it, or you kind of don't? I mean,
a little bit.
You don't really know, right?
Yeah, I mean, I looking at the GitHub stars and the GitHub installs, and usage is still pretty low. That's why I was so excited when you reached out, because again, it's something that I'm using. I'm going to use it on every project, going forward. And I'm really interested in it, and I want it to get into people's hands so they can kind of give feedback, hey, this doesn't work for me. Because obviously, since I built it, I understand all like the, gotchas and things like that. Somebody coming new is going to look at it with fresh eyes, and they're going to point out, this part doesn't really make sense. So yeah, I'd love to get some more adoption. A little bit of feedback I've gotten, probably like 2 power users I've gotten so far. They seem to really like it. They were blown away. One guy on Reddit, I posted it on Reddit, and he said he just dragged his like Obsidian, which is like a note-taking app for Markdown, Obsidian Vault to the directory that, Prezet's looking for. And he was blown away that the whole blog, all his writings were just like there on the website, without him having to do anything. So that seemed like it worked really well for that person.
That's awesome, because normally Reddit goes the opposite way. So that's really, really good when you get good feedback from it.
Yeah, exactly.
So just kind of more on the personal side, like how long have you been using Laravel now?
Man, I was just talking to somebody about that the other day. I started back in like 2014. I feel like it was like, I don't know if that was Laravel 4 or if we were on 5 yet at that point. But yeah, I originally learned, web development. I was doing like Code Igniter stuff, and then, started hearing about, this Laravel framework. And I remember the first interaction I had with it, the pagination feature that's like built in out of the box, that the first time you use that is just like magic, because you just put in a little tag and suddenly you have, all of your paginated records there, and you can click through them and it just works. And I think from that moment on, I was hooked on Laravel. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's funny hearing everybody in that same like that 2014 that seems to have come across. It was like almost all of them was like Code Igniter, and then found Laravel, and then like boom, now we're all in on Laravel, and
Exactly.
It's been great seeing just the community build up from all that, and still around. It's pretty amazing that people find a tool and stick with it for 10 years now.
Yeah.
It seems like all the other tools you kind of hit or miss. So
It's just like you see people saying, and it's so true. Like, it's just the most productive way to like build apps, right? Like, you get so much out of the box, you get so much for free. Everything just works, so smoothly. Like, yeah, I know, there's other ways to do it, but man, I never want to leave Laravel. So.
Yes, for sure. Well, do you have any other sort of open source projects you build or work on, or is it this kind of the one you're focusing on just right now?
This is definitely where the focus is. I've had a couple of attempts at trying to create like some SaaS apps that again, it's tough to get the word out, so those never really went anywhere. But I think this is like the first time I've really tried to market like an open source package, and it's definitely where my attention is, for now. So
that's awesome. Yeah, you could actually convert this into two products. You could have the OG image generator just as a standalone.
Yeah,
because I know I've been seeing that more often lately.
Yeah, I just had somebody in Twitter like suggest there's another package out there called the OG, I think, that doesn't have a browser shot requirement, and I thought that was a really interesting way to do it. I think it's just like creating the image using like image magic or something like that. And so it's not, you don't need this whole, web dependency. It seems really lightweight, but obviously there isn't as much control over the templating there. Whereas, by using browser shot, you can style the template however you want, however you could with the HTML with images and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, that probably could be its own package. The other one in here that I'm really proud of is the optimized images. So what it's doing, out of the box is it's when you have an inline image tag in Markdown, it's turning that into an image tag that contains like a full source set with like a responsive image set. And then there's a controller that Prezet provides that will dynamically resize those images like in real time. So you just upload one size of an image and it'll automatically, create a bunch of different sizes depending on the size of the viewer's, screen. So something like that I think could be spun off as its own thing as well.
Yeah, and that's pretty awesome. I know, what is it, Google Lighthouse? I know it always complains if you don't have the source sets and stuff like that. So that's really important, and it's nice to not have to worry about that.
Yep.
It's nice that you've already taken care of that, I guess is the right wording there.
Right. Again, going back to that's what I really want, because if you have to set all this stuff up yourself, it's just like 1,000 paper cuts, and I really want it to work smoothly, right out of the box. So.
Yes. So what are you using for Markdown or code blocks on the front end? Anything built in on that, or?
Yeah. So I mean, I just added, not that I had to do anything to add support, but if you've seen the discussions around like Torchlight by Aaron Francis, it's like he set up like an API where you basically like are sending the code blocks to him, and he's sending you back the like formatted and with the right colors and everything like that, completed code, and then that gets embedded in your blog post. And that all sounds really complicated, except he created this Markdown or this common mark extension. So with Prezet, all you have to do, because the Prezet config file lets you customize the Markdown extensions that are being used when you're processing your Markdown. You just add this Markdown extension in, and suddenly, all of the code blocks are formatted, beautifully with the Torchlight syntax highlighting. It was really amazing. So yeah, I didn't even have to change anything. I just wrote a little blog article on how to add it, but that works really well.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we're using Torchlight on the Laravel News website as well, and it's been just magical. You just set it up and it works.
Yeah,
and you don't have to think about it.
Yep, so exactly. It's a great product.
Great product that way. And then I assume you're just using. Did you say you're just doing the standard PHP common mark package on the front end?
Yeah, the one that's by the PHP League, and then there's a just like the kind of the standard ones. The as far as other extensions, there's one. I got this idea also from Aaron Francis about doing like blade components inline in Markdown. So as it's processing the Markdown, if it sees this particular tag, then it'll go out and like look for the blade file and then, embed that in the rendered HTML. So that lets you, really easily in your Markdown add like YouTube videos, or I just added a component that does little like alert call outs, which I found really helpful in like documentation if you want to like call the user's attention to something. So that works really well. And then of course, what I was talking about earlier with the image optimization, that's another extension. So anytime it sees an image tag, it's converting that into the, the source set. But otherwise it's, just pretty common ones. So
That's awesome. Yes, I love it. So everybody can find Prezet on GitHub, right? You have a domain for it too, right?
Yep. Yeah. You can find it at prezet.com, which is prezet.com, or the package is Ben Bjurstrom /Prezet on GitHub. So
Sweet. Yes, and we'll definitely have links in the show notes and links over to your. I know I found you on Threads, but I assume you're on all the other services too.
Everybody. Almost everywhere I have just Ben Bjurstrom. So Ben Bjurstrom on Threads and Twitter and LinkedIn and stuff like that. So
sweet. Well, anything else to add or?
Not really. Just, if, as people use it, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. It's definitely something I'm, working on actively. So, or if you have any feature requests or especially if like something's not working right, again, since I'm the only, I know how it's all put together, so it's really easy for me to troubleshoot stuff. But if you run into any issues, definitely let me know so I can make the experience smoother. That's, like I said, the goal of the package.
Exactly. That's awesome. Well, I want to thank Ben for joining us on this Laravel News Creator Series. This has been a fun series to film, as I get to meet everybody, and it's great bringing out people in the community and showing what people have been working on. So thank you so much, Ben, for joining us today.
Yeah. And I want to say thank you, for putting this together. This is a great opportunity, especially for, people who don't have much of a following like myself, to kind of get the word out about what they're working on and meet people within the community. So thank you so much for doing this.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. That's the whole reason.
Yep.
Love it. All right. Cheers.